Correct. So the first question is, who or what inspired you to become a pilot or get interested in aviation?
A lot of these
I'm
questions can,
recording, so.
a lot of these questions can probably be answered. There's a video that Ron did several years ago, interviewed me and maybe one or two other people. And it used to be on the website for the airport. But at any rate,
Okay.
what inspired me to get interested in airplanes, when I was probably in kindergarten, I was born in Columbia, South Carolina. We lived there for probably until I was about a year old. Then we moved to Baton Rouge, Louisiana for about 8 months. Then we moved to California. And I was only about probably 2 years old when we moved to California. And we lived in the San Joaquin Valley. We lived first in Merced and later in Fresno. Mm-hmm. And in Merced, California is the home of Castle Air Force Base. That was a SAC base. And at 2 years old, that was about 1949, which was only 4 years after World War II. So the military was still flying a lot of World War II type airplanes. They were still flying P-51s. The jets were coming in then. Mm-hmm. In fact, the F-86 broke the speed of sound in 1947. That was the year I was born. Mm-hmm. But they were still, the early jets were flying then, the T-33 and P-80 and the F-86. But they were still using B-25s and P-51s. And there are probably a smattering of P-47 Thunderbolts around. And, B-29 bombers, they were still being used, and they used those for tanker planes too. I think they were called RB-50 maybe. So those airplanes, we were not far from Castle Air Force Base, and those airplanes used to fly over our house all the time, coming and going, including the big B-36, the 10 engine. You know what a B-36 looks like? Had 6 R-4360, which was the largest production radial engine built. Had 6 of those engines mounted on the rear of the wing with pusher props on it, and it had 2 jet engines on each wing. So it had 10 engines on it, 4 jets and 6 reset radial engines.
I have to look that one up.
It's a huge airplane. If you go to the Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, they've got one there.
You said it's a
B-36.
B-36.
B-36, yeah. I'll show you what that looked like. Huge airplane.
With 10 engines, wow, I can imagine. And so that was a period in which they mixed props and jets.
Yeah.
Wow. It's got to be interesting looking.
Trying to find a good picture of one. Had to get these when my curiosity overcame my vanity. Originally, it only had the piston engines on it, and later on they added the 4 jets.
So it had 2 pistons and 2 jets.
It had 4 jets
pistons
and 6 piston engines.
Okay, that's right.
They used to fly over our house.
Okay.
Coming and going all the time. And the early jet, the B-47, which was one of the first jet bombers that we had.
So they put so it's a push.
Yeah, the 6 pushers, and but they were radial engines, and they were kind of buried in the wing there.
Yeah, I guess back then radio was the prevalent technology.
Well, yeah, but the jets were coming along then, and they didn't last very long. They came out with the B-47, which kind of took the place of the B-36. Boeing built the B-47, and they flew those over the house all the time too, out of Castle Air Force Base.
You said Castle or the Hassle?
Castle, C-A-S-T-L-E.
Okay.
Like King Arthur's castle.
Yeah. That's what I thought you said.
And I'll show you a B-47.
Looks like that B-36 really had a long, narrow fuselage.
Yeah, it's pretty big if you stand up next to one, but
Mhm.
they, the airplane's so large, it doesn't look that, you look at a photograph of it, it doesn't look like the fuselage is as large as it is, but it's
Yeah.
a big airplane.
Yeah. I've seen, I know exactly what you mean when it comes to scale.
Here is a B-47. This is what they came out with. This was the first all-jet bomber we had, I think, of any consequence.
Mhm.
That kind of took the place of the B-36.
Yeah, I think I've seen
And that's a Boeing-built airplane.
Right, right.
That was the predecessor to the B-52.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
B-52 came out in 1952. That was only 7 years after World War II ended.
Yeah,
So B-52, and they're still using them. They're still
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
So they've
it's amazing.
been a mainstay. But anyway, had airplanes flying over my house all the time, and I just got real interested in it. And then on top of that, we lived in the county, and there were a lot of alfalfa and cotton fields around large farms where we were.
Mhm.
And they crop dusted out there all the time, spraying the cotton fields and alfalfa and so forth. And they were using mostly old biplanes, Waco, Stearman's,
Mhm.
Travel Airs. They put hoppers in them, and they used them for dusters and sprayers. And the pilots would land them on a dirt road out in the field to refuel or to load the hopper again. And they'd wear a leather helmet and goggles, and I'd get as close as I could, but the flagmen would run me off because a lot of the chemicals poison.
Mhm.
And I'd try to get as close as I could before they'd run me off. And the pilots would land on a dirt road, taxi to have the hopper filled up, and they'd push their goggles back on their helmet. They'd sit there with the engine running while they were.
So by this time you were what, 6? 8?
No, I was still 3 or 4 years
Oh
old.
wow, but no wonder they push you away.
And we moved back here when I was 7. I was in the 2nd grade when we moved. My mother was from Durham, and she wanted to move back this way. So when I was in the 2nd grade, we moved back to Durham. I say back to Durham, we moved to Durham. I hadn't lived here before. So that's how I got interested in airplanes. And then once I got enamored with airplanes, then I started building models and flying kites, and I built, I didn't have any money for radio control airplanes, and they weren't really they're not like they are today. They didn't have proportional sticks on them and controls, kind of like a conventional airplane.
Mhm.
These push buttons, and I used to watch them fly them, but I never could afford anything like that. But I built everything from rubber band, stick built, tissue paper covered rubber band airplanes to gliders to U-control airplanes and free flight airplanes. And then we moved back here, or we moved here. I was in the 2nd grade, and I loved airplanes. And this airport at the time was run by Odell Wilkins. It was Wilkins Flying Service. The airport was built in 1945.
Right, right.
Originally, it was Bryan Field. No, I take that back. Originally, it was Ferris Field.
Mhm.
And then Dan Bryan's wife's name was Ferris. And so he named the field for her. And then after he died, his father wanted to name the field Bryan Field. So it was Bryan Field until Odell Wilkins leased the airport. And then it became Wilkins Flying Service.
Right, right.
And that's when I started hanging around out here. I'd get people to bring me out here. All my uncles and family members that drove, I'd try to get them to bring me out here to the airport. So I came out here a lot and started hanging around. And when I was about 13 years old, Odell Wilkins put me to work helping on airplanes, And so he did maintenance work. He was an A&P, and he also was a flight instructor. He had instructed during World War II. And he ran the airport, taught flying, did maintenance. So I started helping him do maintenance and did that all the way through high school.
Hmm.
I learned a lot
Sounds
from
like
him. We rebuilt airplanes and engines and did a lot of things.
that's an interesting story.
So that's how I got into aviation.
Yeah, yeah. So the next question is, what was your non-commercial first flight like as a passenger? When I say non-commercial,
First riding an airplane?
yeah, yeah.
First time I flew in an airplane was when I was about 6 years old. We flew from Raleigh, Durham, out to California to visit my grandmother,
Wow.
because we still had family out there. My father's brothers,
Mm-hmm.
all of his brothers, he had 3 brothers, and his mother lived in California. So when I was about 6, we had lived here. Well, I take that back. I must have been older than that, because we moved here when I was 7, or going on 7. I was probably 7 or 8,
Okay.
and we went out of Raleigh, Durham, and flew, I think, to Chicago, and then from Chicago to California.
Hmm.
And we flew from Chicago to California on a Super Constellation
Hmm.
with 3 tails.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the pilot, the captain on the airplane, back in the day, this was in the 50s, you know, a lot of times the captain would come back and talk to the passengers, and they don't do that as much nowadays, but that was pretty common back then. And he came back in the back, and he could see I was interested in airplanes, so he asked me up to the cockpit. Can't do that now.
Right.
So I went up to the cockpit in that Super Constellation.
Hmm.
There's a 3-man crew on that. It had a flight engineer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He sits behind the 2 pilots, a big panel, and he's
Right.
working the fuel systems and air conditioning, pressurization, heating, engine control, and so forth. And I stood between the pilot and co-pilot behind the flight engineer's seat, and stayed up there a long time until we started the descent.
Hmm.
And I had to go back and sit down, but I was intrigued with all the instruments and flying the airplane, and I said, this is what I want to do.
I bet. I can't imagine that.
Because
being
I
the
wanted
first
to do
flight.
that anyway,
Yeah,
from being
yeah.
around airplanes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And first small airplane I was in, it was not too long after that, we came out here to the airport. And just so happened that when we lived in Columbia, South Carolina, where I was born, Odell Wilkins
Mm-hmm.
lived there also. He was from this area,
Hmm.
but he lived in Columbia when I was born there, and my parents knew him, knew he and his wife. And the first airplane I sat in, I don't have any memory of it because I was real little. I was probably a year old maybe. We went out to the airport one day, and my dad and Odell was working on an airplane out there, and he put me in the seat on that airplane. I don't know what kind of airplane it was, but he said he put me in the seat in Odell's airplane. Well, when I was about 8 years old, not long after we went out to California, we came out here to the airport to see Odell, and he asked me if I wanted to go for a ride. So we got in a J3 and flew the J3, and he let me fly it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was the greatest thing since toilet paper. And that kind of cemented my interest in aviation, and that's what I pursued from that point on.
That's interesting. I wish I had that opportunity. I was interested in aviation, and someone once told me that if you wore glasses, they wouldn't let you fly.
That's
And,
not true.
Yeah, I didn't know any better then.
I know a lot of guys
Yeah.
that have glasses. You can fly in the military and wear glasses. You can't get in there and fly, but once you're in, if
Right.
you have to wear them, you can.
Yeah, see, and I think even now, well, I've learned, I think what they were hearing is that you couldn't fly fighter jets and, well,
Yeah, you can.
oh, really?
As long as you can see, if you have 20/20 vision.
Okay.
At least you used to.
Well, yeah, I think this was back in the shucks, I guess in the 70s, you know, when I had some interest in that kind of
That's a way to weed people out.
yeah,
It doesn't mean you can't do it.
yeah.
It's just a way to weed people out.
Well, you know, I really didn't have any mentors. My dad would take us to RDU, and we'd plane spot on Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my first time hearing the quote whisper jet, you know. So the next question is, what's your first memory of being PIC, excluding training?
When I soloed, that's the first thing I remember being pilot in command. I think that's pretty much anybody that flies, that's the first memory they have of, you know, being solely in charge of the airplane.
Right.
And, you know, that memory stands out in my mind. You know, it's burned into my memory.
I'm sure. Where'd you fly?
Well, he taught primary flying generally in all the airplanes we had at the airport at the time were tail draggers.
I know. I mean,
And he taught in a tailorcraft, BC-12D, like Andy Cotton has, and in a J3 Cub.
mm-hmm.
And he asked me which one I wanted to learn in, and I said, well, which one's the most difficult to fly? He said, well, neither one are difficult to fly, but tailorcraft probably takes a little more finesse.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, well, that's what I want to learn to fly in. And so I learned to fly and soloed in the tailorcraft. Shortly after that, he checked me out in the J3, and
Mm-hmm.
I like the J3 much better because I like the tandem seat.
Mm-hmm.
I like sitting in the back.
Mm-hmm.
I like the stick.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Stick's much more precise control to me than a wheel is.
Mm-hmm.
And I just like the feel of it better. So
Mm-hmm.
I like the J3, but I was fortunate in that growing up out here at the airport and knowing all the guys, the pilots that flew out here, of course, they were a lot older than me. They were like a bunch of old men at the time
Mm-hmm.
because I was just a kid. And I soloed when I was 16, and I had flown with the guys out here at the airport. So a lot of the guys at the airport let me fly their airplanes. You know, I was flying PA-12 Super Cruiser and a J5 Piper and Veronica Champ, and Veronica Chief, and Luscombe and Stinson, and we rebuilt the PT-19, flew that some, and Clipwing Cub, and a bunch of different airplanes.
Wow.
The first one we got, first tricycle gear airplane, we recovered a Tri-Pacer that Odell bought. It had 125 horse Lycoming engine in it, and later Tri-Pacers went on up to 160 horsepower. It was an early version,
Mm-hmm.
but after flying J3s and Veronicas and those airplanes, a Tri-Pacer was like a rocket.
Yeah, it felt fast, didn't it? Yeah.
And I never officially got checked out in it. I flew with a guy over to Chapel Hill one day, asked me if I wanted to, his name was George Scarborough, a real nice guy. He died of cancer later on, but he had a J5, a Cub Cruiser, and he let me fly that. And when we rebuilt that Tri-Pacer, he wanted to fly it one day, so he rented it and asked me if I wanted to go flying with him, and I said sure. So we flew that over to Chapel Hill Airport. And at the time, Chapel Hill wasn't paved, it was just a big grass strip.
Mm-hmm.
Been there since probably early 30s. And he said, I'm going to go sit down over here and drink a Coke. Go fly the airplane. So I'd flown over there to Chapel Hill with him, sitting in the right seat. But I said, if somebody had a P-51 at that time, they'd said, go ahead and go fly it. I said, okay, tell me how to start it. That, you know, when you're young, you're 10 feet tall and bulletproof.
So this question is probably anyway, the question is, how long have you been how long have you been a pilot, a professional pilot?
Professional pilot, flying for a living since, let's see, well, I flew some for money back in probably see, 69 or 70, I don't remember exactly.
Okay.
And then I went back about early 70s, about 71. I got a job flying for a coal company out of Beckley, West Virginia, MU2. I don't know if you know what that is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mitsubishi.
Yeah, flew with them for about 9 years, and then got on with Piedmont
Mm-hmm.
in 79. And then U.S. Air bought Piedmont, and I retired, spent about 25 years
Wow.
with them, and then I had to retire at 60. I had a 60 mandatory retirement age then. Not long after I retired, they changed it to 65 because they were running out of pilots.
Mm-hmm.
And they talked about moving it up to 70. I was part of a NASA study one time from Ames Research Center out in California.
Mm-hmm.
And they did the first official study that had ever been on the physiology of airline flight crews.
Mm-hmm.
And Kurt Graber, who's now the head of the Ames Research Physiology Department at NASA, he rode on the jump seat on a 4-day trip during this procedure that we went on.
And you were
They
flying.
wired you up to a computer and hooked you up to EKG and motion detector and so forth.
What were you flying?
737 at that
Okay.
time.
737.
And it was voluntary, you didn't have to do it. But they sent somebody from Ames Research Center to ride on a jump seat for the trip.
Mm-hmm.
And you had a clock that was coordinated with the digital clock on Kurt's wrist. And so if there was an anomaly, if you say had to shoot a low approach or it was really windy or anything unusual,
Mm-hmm.
he would mark the time on it. And it was put on a floppy disk, and you know what a floppy disk is at the time. And when you got back in after its 4-day trip, it was actually 6 days because the computer that you wore recorded 6 days of, you wore it 24 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
It recorded your temperature, had a wrist, a band around your wrist that had a motion detector on it. The main reason for that was to determine how well you slept, because he said usually when you sleep, when you dream, your body kind of doesn't move.
Hmm.
And that's a way to prevent you from injuring yourself.
Hmm. I remember that.
Doesn't hold true 100% of the time, but most of the time. So he said when you're sleeping, you're usually in motion, but when you're still, it's usually when you're in REM sleep.
Okay.
And that's why the motion detector was there. And then they had a rectal thermometer about 6 inches long that you stuck up your butt that had to be in there 24 hours a
Pretty
day.
invasive.
And he said it's the same stuff that the astronauts wore.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had a diary, and you had to write down everything you ate, whenever you went to the bathroom, what you ate, how well you slept on a scale of, say, 1 to 5. About every 2 hours you had to fill out this sheet, mood check, this diary, and it had a whole bunch of questions on it.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a pain in the butt, literally and figuratively.
Literally.
And he's an interesting guy.
Hmm. So this next question is probably one of my favorites. So what's the best/worst thing that happened to you as a pilot?
Uh, I don't know. I can't really think of anything. I've had to make, precautionary landings because of some anomaly. Had a set of NICAD batteries explode in the MU-2 one time. Almost had a thermal runaway, battery thermal runaway in a Learjet one time.
A battery thermal.
Well, NICAD batteries at the time, they're in nylon cells. The cells were in a steel box with stainless steel latches on it. And if the temperature on those batteries got above about 160 degrees, you could have a thermal runaway where they'd get so hot that the cells would melt. Plastic on the cells would melt, the cells would fuse together and short out, and it would literally melt through the bottom of the airplane. I saw a Turbo Commander one time in Dallas that had a thermal runaway on a battery, and a battery box was right beside, that was a twin engine turboprop. Battery box was right beside behind the rear seat, kind of close to the left side of the airplane. He had a thermal runaway, and when he landed, it had melted a hole through the aluminum about that big around the side of the airplane.
And roughly what year, what time period was this?
That was when I was flying for the coal company. It's probably, let's see here, probably about 76.
Wow, I didn't know that the NI batteries were that old. I would have thought that.
Yeah, NICADs.
Yeah.
And the FAA came out, they had some crashes due to that.
Yeah.
And the FAA came out with mandatory temperature monitors.
Okay.
That you had these temperature monitors on the airplane that went back to the battery, and there was 2 batteries on there. And you had to monitor the temperatures on them, and it would alert you to what the temperatures were. And there were 2 warning lights on the panel. One was a 140 light, and one was a 160 light. 140 was an alert. It was yellow, and the red light was 160 as a warning light. And the warning light came on. You get on the ground as quick as you can. I was at let's see, I was about, I don't know, around 41,000 feet or so, when not too far from Denver. When well, actually about 15 minutes out of Denver. I was going to Salt Lake City, but about 15 minutes from Denver, the warning light, not the warning light, but the caution light, the yellow caution light came on. And the FAA would allow you to go without the temperature sensors hooked up if you were in maintenance. Well, the day before I left on that trip, I'd been for an inspection in Parkersburg, West Virginia, at Rambar Aviation. They were MU-2, and actually, they were MU-2 and Lear Service Center. And they took they needed to deep cycle the batteries, and they didn't have time, so they said they had 2 batteries in the shop that they used that were good batteries, and they put those batteries in there. Unfortunately, those batteries didn't have the proper connections for the temperature sensors we had. But the FAA allowed you, and they said, we've used these batteries, they're good batteries, and they allowed you to go for a day or 2 for maintenance without being hooked up to it. So the gauges didn't work. That caution light came on. Of course, I immediately looked at the gauges, and I said, nah, they're not hooked up. So, well, I take that back. I mean, this has been so long ago. I didn't know they weren't hooked up because they didn't mention it.
Mm-hmm.
I assumed they were hooked up.
Hmm.
Found out later on they weren't because they didn't. The connections wouldn't fit. But the gauges always ran in the green down at the bottom of the gauges,
Mm-hmm.
about the same place they were when you shut it off.
Hmm.
So when that yellow light came on, caution light came on, I looked down at battery temperatures, and they were where they normally were.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, well, that must be an anomaly, just a false light. I'll just keep an eye on it. Well, about 10 or 15 minutes later, the red warning light came on. I said, that's a problem,
Yeah.
because those two lights are two independent sources hooked up to the battery.
Okay.
So they work independent of one another. So I knew when that 140 light came on, that 160 light came on, they were hot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I turned the batteries off, and of course I still had the generators. Turned the battery switches off so they wouldn't charge the batteries anymore, and told Center I needed to make a precautionary landing. I'd had the batteries overheating, and so spiraled down over from 41,000 feet over Denver, and Denver had a Lear service center there. The batteries were so hot you couldn't take them out with leather gloves on.
Mm-hmm.
We had to wait about 3 hours before they cooled down enough to be
Wow.
able to get them out of the airplane. They said that the batteries were probably bad, and they had spare batteries, and they said, you can use these batteries, are good. Well, they couldn't hook theirs up to the temperature sensors either because they didn't have the proper connections. So they said, yeah, you're good to go. So took off and headed for Salt Lake City, went to Salt Lake City, picked up a part, took off out of Salt Lake City, heading back to West Virginia. About 30 minutes out of Salt Lake City, the 140 light comes on. I said, crap. A few minutes later, the 160 light came on. And then, in a matter of about 2 seconds, it's like popcorn pop. Circuit breakers started popping.
Mm-hmm.
Generator circuit breakers popped. Of course, I had the battery switches turned off. Generator switches popped. The radar circuit breaker popped. The standby comm circuit breaker popped. The number 2 comm circuit breaker popped.
Mm-hmm.
The radar circuit breaker popped. And these things were just like that.
Wow.
And I told Center, I said, I'm down to 1 radio and 1 nav and 1 generator. I got 1 generator back on the line. I said, I got a generator on the line. The weather was good, fortunately. I said, I'm headed for, had a battery overheat, I'm headed for Wichita. And if you lose me, I'm still going to be headed for Wichita.
Okay.
And I might not have a radio when I land, but I'll be there in about an hour.
Thank God that 1 generator held, because that MU2 doesn't have around there, does it?
Well, that was in the Lear.
Oh, that's the Lear.
That's
Okay.
the Lear 35.
Okay.
So,
But that doesn't have around there either, does it?
no. So, limped into Wichita, and that's where the Lear factory was.
Mm-hmm.
So, if anybody had the maintenance, it was them. And,
Is that why you chose?
well, it wasn't that far away, and it was the best place to go for maintenance, especially for an unusual problem like that.
Right, right.
So went into Wichita, was there for 3 days, and the factory worked on it, and they couldn't find anything wrong. They ran the engines and everything, and they couldn't find anything wrong. They checked all the electrical panels out. And then they called me one night and said, asking me late at night, it was about 11 or 12, if I could come out there and run the engines. I said, yeah, I'll be out there. So I went out there and ran the engines, and the guy that was the mechanic that was back in the back of the airplane where what they call the E&E compartment, the electrical components and so forth are back there. We call it the hell hole because there's a hatch you have to open to stand up in there. And the electrical panel with the inverters and the over voltage relays and the voltage regulators and all that stuff is back there on this panel.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, we just got out of maintenance the day before, and I was running the engines, and the mechanic came up front and he said, "You can shut them down." I found out where the problem was, and what it was, when we were in maintenance, came out of maintenance the day before, there's stainless steel ductwork off of the bleed air system on the engine. It's high pressure bleed air. It's used to pressurize the cabin,
Mm-hmm.
and it's used for anti-ice for the engine
Mm-hmm.
nacelles, the leading edge,
Mm-hmm.
and the wing leading edges and the tail leading edges to keep ice from forming on there. Those bleed air ducts are made out of stainless steel. And they have these stainless steel clamps that clamp a flange together that holds them together. Somebody had taken one of those clamps off,
Mm-hmm.
and they stuck it back on there, but they didn't tighten it up.
Hmm.
So when you crank the engine up and you turn the bleed air on, it pushed
Mm-hmm.
the thing about that far apart.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was right by that electrical panel. So it was blowing extremely hot air across the voltage regulators and the over voltage relays and all that,
Hmm.
causing an over voltage. So
And that
the
happened,
over voltage
and that happened
caused
in
the
flight.
batteries to overheat.
So that happened in flight. So the duct monitor check, the pre-flight duct monitor check wouldn't have caught that anyway.
Well, there's not any duct. There's battery temperature sensors,
Okay.
but there was no check
Okay,
about the bleed air ducts.
not for the
There's no check on that.
Which model year was that?
35.
35. Okay.
In fact, yeah, I got a I got a picture of the MU2. In fact, that model of that MU2 up there is painted like the one I flew.
Yeah, I see it.
And then behind that is a picture of the MU2, but I've got a picture of the Lear somewhere, but I think I don't know if it's in my office or where it is. At any rate,
Those MU.
so that was an interesting experience, but
Yeah, I'm sure.
I mean, you do what you have to do, you don't think too much about it.
Yeah, yeah. So, wow.
And I was taking off one time in a 737-400 out of Sarasota, Florida. And there's a really high grass. The grass is about this high on either side of the runway. And I started rolling on takeoff, and I saw a huge flock of seagulls that kind of came up out of the grass, and then they sat back down again. They were just off to the left side of the runway. Well, I'm watching those seagulls. I'm watching the airspeed indicator, and I'm watching, which are V1 speed, go, no-go speed.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm watching those seagulls, and as we're accelerating down the runway, seagulls came up out of that grass again, and they didn't settle back into it. They came up, and when there's so many of them, they move in unison.
Mm-hmm.
And you see this white cloud moving in unison. Because there's, I don't know how many of them.
Mm.
Must have been 1,000 of them. There was a huge flock. And they came up out of the field, and I was accelerating and hit about 100 knots, which is 115 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And they broke towards the runway, and then they broke away from it. And just as we approached them, they turned right and went right across the runway right in front of us,
Mm.
and went into the engines. And the left engine took some, and what they call the fan blades on the front of the engine, it shingled the blades. That means it stacked them up
Mm-hmm.
when it hit.
Mm.
And there's a loud bang, so I was right at the go no go speed. So I rejected the takeoff because I didn't know how much damage that engine had, and I didn't know how much damage the right engine had, if any.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to become airborne and then realize I didn't have any engines. So I rejected the takeoff, and that was uneventful. I mean, it stopped and taxied back to the gate.
That was uneventful.
Canceled the flight. It wasn't uneventful for the passengers because they didn't have any way to get where they were going. But they had to fly maintenance in. And
That's amazing that you feel like that was uneventful to be just, you said you had reached V1, you were just about at V1?
Just real close to it, about 10 knots below.
Wow, and that's uneventful?
About another couple of seconds, I would have been
Yeah,
there.
yep, yep.
But I had remembered reading several years before that about a Lear that took off out of Atlanta, I think out of Peachtree Airport, and had a flock of starlings come up off the runway and flew through them. About the time they rotated and got airborne, they hit these starlings and flamed both engines out, and they crashed into an apartment building. And
Wow.
that thought crossed my mind when
Yeah.
we hit those seagulls, and I didn't. You don't have time to determine how much damage you've got on the engines.
Right, right.
So I said, we're better off, since we're on the ground, we're better off to stay on the ground.
Yeah, yeah. Was there any chance that you were pretty close to running out of runway
No.
on that? Okay.
That's not a real long runway, but it was, I wasn't that heavy that day.
Okay.
The brakes are set to automatic brakes for takeoff to what they call RTO, rejected takeoff.
Right, RTO.
And it was on RTO, and that will flat get you stopped.
Okay.
Of course, I used heavy reverse on it too, on the engines, or on the engine on the right. Left one was still running, but the blades were shingled and the compressor stalled when the birds hit it. But you don't have time to really evaluate how much damage you've got. You got a split second to decide what you want to do.
I know. My experience with fast moving aircraft is in the sim, and that's just like you guys in the real world. You don't have a lot of time to if it ain't muscle memory, then you kind of SOL.
And the sad thing is that sometimes somebody will make a wrong decision. But you've got a split second to make a decision. You can't sit there and wait.
Right.
And if you made the wrong decision, if in that case, let's say I'd have rotated and found out I lost both engines and we were airborne, and you go off into the runway, into a house or whatever, and then the guys that from the NTSB who have months and months to determine if your decision was the right one or not,
Yeah.
they'd say, well, he made the wrong decision. He should have rejected the takeoff.
Yeah. I saw the Sully story, and they wanted to claim from what I saw that he initially made the wrong decision.
I've been out of LaGuardia many times, taking off on that same runway, making that same turn that he made, and I remember many times, I always played what if. I would think, what if I lost both engines right now? Where would I go? When I'd be flying across country to the West Coast or something, I'd say, I lost both engines right now. Where's the closest place? Where's the best place to go? Where could I land this thing if both engines quit? And I've gone out of LaGuardia before on that same runway and made that left turn as part of the departure and looked down at the river, and I'm thinking, if I lost both engines, where could I go? In the river. That's the only place you've got. Because that target, that runway is a small target, and there are approach light piers in the water leading up to the runway. And the runway is on the edge of a cliff. It's not like it gradually tapers up. You got these steel piers where the approach lights are, and then you'd slam into the ground short of, on the side of the runway. If you overshot, you'd go through the steel piers on the other side of the runway. So there's no guarantee you're going to make it in the first place. Teterboro, which they mentioned in Sully's thing, ATC said they asked about Teterboro. I wouldn't even think about going to Teterboro. I've been in Teterboro before numerous times. The runways aren't that long, and there's nothing but buildings between. If you didn't make that airport, you're going down in buildings.
Mm-hmm.
There's nowhere to land on Manhattan Island.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at least the river doesn't have any obstacles in it. And if you can set it down with the nose high and the water's not too rough and you keep the wings level,
Mm-hmm.
if you got a wing down and it dug into the water, it's going to cartwheel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fortunately, their water wasn't that rough at that time.
Yeah.
But I thought about that, and many times I thought the only place to go is in the river.
Mm.
Felt
So,
like you got a lot of choices.
so tell me, how you got involved with EEA or
EAA.
yeah, EAA or and more specifically Chapter 879, and which I guess is your local chapter. So,
Yeah, well, this chapter's been here a long time. I've lived here going on 33 years.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the first houses built out here when we
Okay.
built this house.
Hmm.
And
I think this house would be there.
well, we've kept it up through the year. We've kept everything up to date on it.
Yeah, yeah. Open floor plan. Yeah, that.
Yeah, we kind of designed the house ourselves. We took things we liked out of several sets of plans we looked at, and we wanted it to be open. So if Judy's working in the kitchen, or we've got company, everybody feels like they're,
Mm-hmm.
you know, close together, and it's a little more spacious and
Yeah.
not chopped up with walls.
Yeah, because the open, 33 years ago, I don't know how popular the open floor plan was.
It wasn't.
Right.
And I said, if we live here a long time, I don't want to walk up and down stairs, and you don't need to be. So
Yeah, I get that.
we'll build a ranch house, and we did a lot of our own work on it. We worked on this house for 6 months. I was flying 4-day trips, mostly 4-day trips with the airlines, and every day I was off. I was out here working from daylight till late at night. And my wife was working. She was a nurse, but she was working out here all the time too when I was gone, and when I was here. And took 6 months from the time we started this house until we finished it. And we did a lot of our own work on it, and I subcontracted it myself.
Mm-hmm.
And with the help of a friend of mine that's a contractor. He didn't have time to build it. He had too many houses going at the time.
Yeah.
But he made recommendations and helped me get some subs.
Mm-hmm.
But it took us almost exactly 6 months from the time we started until we finished it. And in that 6 months, we kept track between working our jobs and working on this house.
Mm.
We had 2 days off in 6 months,
Mm.
Christmas and Thanksgiving.
Wow.
We worked every other day for 6 months.
Wow.
I was never so glad to get done with anything in my life.
Well, it paid off. It's a beautiful house. It really is. It really is. So, back to how you actually got involved with EAA.
Oh, well, I'd been interested in the EAA the EAA was around, when I was a kid working out here.
Okay.
And Odell Wilkins was a member of the EAA, but I didn't have enough money to join.
Mm-hmm.
But when I got older, I joined the EAA. I think I've been a member since like 73 or something like that. I can't remember exact date, but in the 879 chapter, when we moved out here almost 33 years ago, Sterling Gann, who owned the airport at the time and built this development, he started that chapter 879.
Yes,
And we
I
had a lot of
remember.
members back
Yeah.
then. And so I started going to the chapter meetings, when he was alive. Back then, we had a lot of people come to meetings then. I don't know, we probably averaged 25 or more. There were a lot of members. I was counting not long ago, and it was amazing how many of them had died.
Yeah. That's age thing.
Yep.
So, what do you wish people know or knew? What do you wish people knew about EAA or the chapter?
Well, if I could wish anything for the chapter, I don't know, I can't think of anything what I would wish people to know about the chapter. Wish more people knew it was here, and we had more people interested in it. And what I was getting ready to say, especially young people. Mm-hmm. That's what you need is young people. Young people keep everything going. Mm-hmm. It's just like at church. Churches fail generally for one reason is because the population of the church ages out, mm-hmm. and you don't have the young people coming into it. Mm-hmm. Maybe the community kind of deteriorates and a lot of people move away, mm-hmm. and the older people that went to it died out, mm-hmm. and you don't have enough people to support it. And it's the same way with a lot of things, including the EAA chapters. Mm-hmm. I was talking to Susan Dusenberry not long ago. Susan is the president of our Vintage Aircraft Chapter 3. She's also the president of the EAA Vintage Classic Division in Oshkosh.
Okay.
She goes up there for meetings a lot. She's got a grass strip at Walnut Cove, okay. North of Winston-Salem. We were talking not long ago, and she said that the average age of the pilot that owns, say, a Warbird, which it could be a lot of airplanes considered Warbirds, J3s or Roncas, they were Warbirds. They were liaison airplanes and observation airplanes. Stearmans, T6s, P-51s, all that. She said the average age of the people that own those airplanes are mid-60s to 70. Hmm. And it's expensive, but aviation's never been cheap. Yeah. It's always been expensive. Yeah. If I told you what it cost to rent an airplane here, when I was out here as a kid working, it was $3.50 an hour solo.
Wow.
$5 an hour dual.
Wow. And
that included fuel.
Wow.
But at the time, it was still expensive. It was still an extravagance most people couldn't afford.
Yeah,
yeah. And airplanes were cheaper back then too, but cheap is a relative term.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cheaper than, we consider them cheap today, but back then, most people couldn't afford them. You could buy a used one. But I wish that we could get more young people interested in the EAA. I think one way to do that is through the Young Eagles program. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't stress joining a chapter and getting involved in aviation as much as it does just taking a ride and maybe considering at some point learning how to fly. Mm-hmm. But it takes youth to keep things going.
Agreed.
And you've got to stimulate that interest. And one of the things that's different, we had a friend of mine and I had when Sterling Gann had the airport, a friend of mine and I started an Aviation Explorer Scouts unit. I'd been a Cub Scout and a Boy Scout and an Explorer Scout. Mm-hmm. A friend of mine and I started an Explorer Scout unit, Aviation Explorer Scout unit. And when Sterling had the place and we moved out here, another friend of mine that flew some, and he and I started a Aviation Explorer Scout unit out here at the airport. And we had quite a few. We had about 12 or so kids in it. But it was a chore trying to kids, modern day kids, I think it's always been this way to an extent, but not as much as it is nowadays. Kids today, you've got to constantly have flashing lights and bells and whistles and things that keep them motivated. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Back when I was a kid, you motivated yourself. Yeah. You build a model airplane, go out and fly it. Yeah. It seems like you've got to push kids harder today to do anything. Yeah. They're not self-motivated. And that's not true in all cases. In some cases they are, but not as much as they used to
Yeah,
be.
I agree.
And I've had, when we owned the airport, we owned the airport for 25 years. I've had, I don't know how many school classes come out here, from seniors in high school to Duke students to grade school students, younger kids. And I found that to be true. If you don't constantly bombard them with bells and whistles and to keep them stimulated, motivated, they lose interest.
Yeah.
I think they have so much coming at them today that it's just, maybe aviation seems too benign to them or something, just, I've had high school kids come out here before. I had a high school class come out here, and they had what they called a aeronautical engineering course. There were kids that were going to college in engineering, and they wanted one of the teachers set up this course, people interested in aviation, because he didn't fly, but he belonged to a radio control model airplane club, and he had an interest in aviation, and he was trying to keep the youth interested in it. And he had about 15 kids. They were going into various types of engineering that they planned to when they got out of high school. And I talked to him when we had a break, and I said, we were talking about the same thing, and he said the same exact thing. He said, young kids today, I can tell you from being a teacher, you've got to have flashing lights and noises and bells and whistles constantly, or they lose interest in it. And I asked the kids, I said, how many of you have flown in an airplane or even actually flown an airplane before? And all these hands shot up. I've flown a computer flight simulator. And I said, there is no comparison between flying a real airplane and flying a computer. You can learn a little bit like that, but there's no comparison.
No seat of the pants.
And but that's the way kids are nowadays. I don't know how easy it is to get more young people into the EAA chapter, because they probably look at it as a bunch of old men sitting around on a weekend talking, and I don't know what you have to do to get them interested.
With all the organizations that I've been a part of, it seems like, in my opinion, the ones that tend to do the best are the ones that have some project that people are interested in. So that's one of the reasons why I mentioned at the last meeting that, if we can get one of the owners who got one of these derelict planes to just let us tinker with it and clean it up and just show it to kids and tear it apart, put it back together, just some sort of project, then we might be able to get them involved with actually doing something. Kids, I think, want to do, and it's hard, after sitting in school 6 hours a day listening and having to sit on your hind parts. It's hard to motivate them to come somewhere and sit and listen, so.
But another thing that dissuades kids, I think, too, is the cost of it. They look at the cost of it. It's what I used to tell the kids when we had the Explorer Scout chapter. We had all colors of kids in there, black, white, Hispanic. We had different kids in there. And I remember a couple of kids in there that were black, and I said, you guys need to learn how to fly and, go out, get an airline career, get a job. And they were like, nah, we couldn't do that. That wouldn't work for us. And I said, I'm going to tell you something, and don't ever forget it. If you want to do something bad enough, no matter what's thrown in your way.
Yeah, that's true.
If you want to do it bad enough, you can do it.
Yeah.
Don't ever fool yourself.
Yeah.
Don't ever tell yourself you can't. You can. I know. I've got good friends that are black that fly for the airlines. And they're outstanding pilots. And they didn't have anything when they started, but they fought tooth and nail to get what they've got.
Yeah.
So if you want it, you can get it. Don't beat yourself in the ground and tell yourself you can't do it.
Yeah.
Because you can do it.
That's true. I got an old saying that if you want to do something, generally you find a way to do it if you want to do
Yeah.
it. Yep. Yep. So I'm gonna finish up with what, if anything, you want people to know about you, or anything that you want people to know about Randy.
I guess just tell them that I wish I was half the man my dog thought I was.
Okay.
I don't have anything particular. I'm no different than anybody else. I mean, I did what I wanted to do. The good Lord's been good to me, and I've always wanted to fly, and that's what I always strove for. And the good Lord was kind enough to let me follow my dream, and I can still do it, fortunately. And so I have no complaints. If I had to do it all over again, I'd do the same thing.
And that's a statement.
But so many young people today I talk to don't know what they want to do. I can't see somebody not knowing what they want to do, because all my life I knew what I wanted to do and I always worked towards that goal. And the thought of not having any idea what you want to do is just foreign to me.
Well, you know, I'm in the opposite camp. I never really knew what I wanted to do. I went to school and got a business degree and hated it. Sat behind a desk for a while. I studied accountancy and never really used it. So now I do home improvement, work with my hands, but now I got a bad back. So I wish that, anyway, so I do a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Yeah, but never really knew what I wanted to do. So I wish I had been one that had a goal as a young person and followed through with it, you know, because one of the things I do believe, if you do what you enjoy, then you'll never work a day in your life.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I've said that many times. I don't know who came up with that saying, but it's so true.
Yeah, I believe that.
If you love what you do and do what you love, you never work a day in your life.
Yep.
Not that they don't have hard days, no matter what.
Yeah, that's life.
I never regretted what I do and what I did. I'm very fortunate.
Well,
I know people 40, 50 years old still don't know what they want to do. They go to college and get a degree. I've known so many people. My next door neighbor, Terry Reynolds, that used to live next door, they sold the house and moved to Georgia. Mm-hmm. His son went to Harvard, got an MBA,
mm-hmm.
played professional baseball.
Mm.
He's a really, really nice young man. I say he's probably 31 or so now. But his dad flew for the Air Force in Vietnam and got out of there, and he flight instructed for Lockheed under contract in Saudi Arabia, checking Saudi Arabian pilots out in C-130s.
Hmm.
And then after that, he got on with the airlines and flew for the airlines until he retired. He's the same age I am. We retired about the same year. And his son went to Harvard, got an MBA, got out of there, played professional baseball, very athletic. Smart guy, one of the sharpest guys I know. And he decided when he was about 27, not that many years ago, he got a job working at Duke in the business office. Mm-hmm. And he said, I was bored to death. He said, if I have to sit behind this desk I will go out of my mind. So he got to thinking, he had seen his father fly, all his life, and he had flown with his father. He said, I kind of think I'd like to learn how to fly. So they talked to me some about it, and he and his dad bought a Ronca Chief, and he learned how to fly that. And then he decided he wanted to go, he liked it so much, he said, that's what I want to do. It's exciting, it's an activity I enjoy. That's what I want to do. So he went out to flight school at Raleigh, Durham, and got, I think it was ATP, got all his ratings, flight instructed for them, and he wanted to build time as fast as he could. So he got a job flying on his days off down in Sanford, flying a Mixmaster, a push-pull Cessna, under contract for the military, doing some kind of stuff over Fort Bragg down there at night. And he did that, and then he instructed some too down at Sanford for an outfit down there while he was instructing for ATP, because after you get your ratings, you build time instructing. And then he bought a 150 Cessna, and he flew that in all his spare time. He'd go out in the morning and fly hours and hours just to build time. And he got his time, he got about 1,500 hours and got his ATP. And Piedmont Airlines hired him, a commuter for American. And he flew for them for about, I don't know, a year. And his son came down with incurable, he had a young son that was about 3 years old. He came down with an incurable disease. It's very, very rare. There's only about 20 people in the country that have it.
Wow.
And usually kids don't live very long with it. It's called Pearson syndrome. And they said the only hope is to go over to, they're doing experimental work with it in Israel, and take him over there, and they accepted him. And they've had some luck with some experimental treatments over there. So he went over there, and he had to take time off from Piedmont. Well, while he was over there, they were over there about 3 weeks, they found out, the hospital in Israel found out he had childhood leukemia on top of that.
Wow.
And they said, if we give him the treatments that we were going to, it would kill him. You need to treat this leukemia. You need to take him to the Boston Children's Hospital. And they have to give him a bone marrow transplant and bring his immune system down to nothing. And he and his wife had to stay with him all the time. That was their only child at the time. Since then, they've had 2 more. But the chief pilot at Piedmont got kind of ticked off at him and jumped on him about taking so much time off. And he said, this is my son. He's on the border of dying. What am I supposed to do? So the guy ticked him off so much, he just said, well, you can take this and put it where the sun never shines.
Yeah.
And then he saw his son through all that, and his son started improving.
Good.
In the meantime, he said, I always wanted to fly for the Air Force. And so he went, by then he had about 2,500 hours. He went into, interviewed with a Air Force Reserve unit in Georgia. It flies A-10s. And they were so impressed with him because he's a really nice guy, good personality, hard worker, smart as a whip, is not overbearing or tries to impress people with his degree or anything. He's real unassuming. And the fact that he played professional baseball on top of all that, they really liked him, and all the pilots down there liked him. So they said, well, we'll send you to flight school. They had an opening, so they sent him to flight school in the Air Force. He soloed. The instructors were so impressed with his flying, they said, we're going to try to break a record soloing you. He soloed in one of the T6s that the Air Force uses now for training with a turboprop engine in it, on his second flight.
Wow.
That broke a record in
Wow.
the Air Force. Then he was number one in just about everything in his class, including voted number one by the rest of the students in the
Wow.
class. And then he went to fighter school after that in Arizona, flying T-38s. And he was number one in that.
Hmm.
And he finished that and then went to A-10 school, which is units flying A-10s, and finished number one in that. And then he went back to his unit in Georgia, and about a week ago they were deployed to the Middle East somewhere. But he loves it.
Yeah.
He said, blowing things up and shooting things is really fun.
Sounds like you were smart as a whip.
Because it's only been trucks and things sitting out there on the.
Right.
in
So
the
how
middle
does
of nowhere.
son fare?
His son's doing well. He will never probably. Most kids don't live to be older than about, at the oldest, about 8 or 10 or 11 years old. Right now he's in the 2nd grade. And he's doing well. He's a real smart little kid. And he has been through so much in his life.
Sounds like it.
He's been through more than most adults could go
Yeah,
through.
sounds like it.
And
With his
he
prisons and-
has learned to, he's very, very mature for his age.
Yeah,
And all the kids he's in school with like him.
takes out his dad, huh?
He used to, I was helping work on an airplane that Terry bought. And I had to do a lot of work on it. And I was over there a lot in his hangar. And his son saw me work on it a lot. He'd call me Mr. Wandy. And one day he was playing, his grandmother filmed it. He was playing on the ground with some little men, and he had a little airplane down there. And she said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm playing." Of course, he was only about 3 at the time. And he said, "What are you playing?" He said, "This is Mr. Wandy. He's working on there."
And your first name is Winston.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
father's name was Winston,
Okay,
and they named me Winston. My middle name's Randolph,
okay.
but I've always gone by Randy. That's what my family
Right.
called me, and what.
Now, I found that out, on the EAA
Yeah.
website. Yeah, so,
It's Winston Randolph is what it is, but I go by Randy.
yeah.
Actually, my nickname growing up was Buzz, not from flying, but I had 2 sisters. My older sister passed away
Oh,
about 3
sorry.
years ago. She was 3 years older than me, and when I was born, she couldn't say brother, and she said something that sounded like buzzer. So they started calling me Buzz when I was just a baby. So it stuck with me, and that's what my family called me, and not many people know that. Woody does. I've known Woody for over 50 years.
Okay, yeah, from the
And
field.
that's what they used to call me when he had the airport here, was Buzz. But nobody else really knows it. That didn't ring a bell with anybody.
I would imagine that the ones who did call you Buzz without knowing the backstory, I always figured it was
Thought it
from-
had something to do with aviation,
Yeah.
but it doesn't.
Yeah. How about that?
You're
Well,